I'm attorney Phil Giacino, and this is Finding Common Ground here on Altice. You can see this show every Saturday at 10 a.m. on channel 115. I like to start my show with a quote from a book that he wrote called Divorce: A Practical Guide. This quote is from Winston Churchill. He says, "A pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, while an optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty." And that'll be tied into what we're going to discuss tonight. The first part of the show is about a documentary called Long Shot, and it has to do with Larry David and a man charged with murder. The second part of the show will be frequently asked questions. Let's get to it. If I said to you, or if I used the words Larry David and death row in a sentence, you would be like, what are you talking about? Larry David actually saved the life of a person who would have been on death row had he been convicted of murder. Now, Larry David, you may know from Seinfeld. He's co-creator and co-writer for Seinfeld. He also has a show called Curb Your Enthusiasm. I haven't watched it much, but the few times I've watched it, it's hilarious. And he is also does Bernie Sanders on Saturday Night Live. It's hilarious. I think he does Bernie better than Bernie does. But he's a very talented man. In fact, he does a couple of cameos in Seinfeld. One of them is he's the man with the cape who's the defense attorney for George Costanza's father, Frank Costanza. Now, what am I talking about when I say Larry David and death row? In May of 2003, a 16-year-old girl was killed in front of her Los Angeles home by someone who they believed to be Juan Catalan. Now, there were witnesses that put him at the scene. Juan lived nearby, and there was even a motive. Because this 16-year-old girl named Martha Puebla had testified in a murder trial involving Juan Catalan's brother. So Juan Catalan is arrested for murder. And by all accounts, he's going down. There are witnesses, there's an alibi. He's in big trouble. And even if he doesn't get the death penalty, which they had at that time, he could spend the rest of his life in jail. And at the time, he was 24 years old, young guy, just starting out in his life. And so was that unfortunate young woman who was killed. So what happens next is pretty amazing. And it's the plot for a show called, well, it's a documentary actually called Long Shot, which you can see on Netflix. It's a 40-minute documentary. The guy is arrested, and he has an attorney. Eventually, he gets a better attorney. And he says to the attorney, "I was at Dodger Stadium on that May day in 2003 watching a game between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Atlanta Braves." So what does the attorney do? He goes to Dodger Stadium, and he tries to get footage of the game. They have a thing called Dodger Vision, and also live tape of live shots during the game. You know how you always see people in the stands and in the on the field, you know, walking around, just general shots of people. And the attorney was hoping that he could actually capture Juan Catalan's image on either Dodger Vision or one of the other cameras. Because if he could do that, he might be able to provide him with an alibi, depending on the time. And according to his client, he was there. No mistake about it. So the attorney tries to get all this footage. He looks, nothing. He strikes out. That's a baseball pun. But he can't capture the guy. And from what I understand, they saw a little bit of something that could be him, but certainly not enough that would give him an airtight alibi and clear him. But then Juan Catalan says to his attorney, "I remember that they were filming a show, not part of the game, but there was some kind of show." And I don't even think he knew who Larry David was, but he told his attorney this information. So the attorney said, you know what I got to lose? Let me go back to Dodger Stadium. He contacts the public relations department at Dodger Stadium, gives them the date and time of the game, and he says, was there any filming at that time? And it just so happens that an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm was filmed at Dodger Stadium on that date in May of 2003. But would they capture the image of Juan Catalan to provide an alibi? And the good thing was, 1 in a million shot, it happened to be in the section where he was sitting. But that's still not a guarantee that they would get him. So the attorney looks at all the footage and doesn't see anything until the very end. After the episode was finished, they were still taping. And Larry David, being the ham that he is, walked down toward the field, and there's like an aisle. When you go to a ball game, there's aisles, obviously. And there are people on the left, people on the right, and you really can't tell who's who because most of the people are looking at the field. But here they were looking at Larry David, his arms were raised, he was being a ham, and he was getting laughs. So as he's walking back toward the camera, away from the field, Juan Catalan and his daughter, who's about 4 years old, went to get ice cream. Now, if he didn't go to get ice cream at that very moment, he would have never had an alibi because where he was sitting was behind the wall. You couldn't see him. You could only see him after he got up, and as Larry David's walking up, you see him walk toward the camera and then disappear. He's holding his daughter's hand. He's getting her ice cream. So that provided an alibi, certainly for that time frame. But he needed a little bit more of an alibi because theoretically he could have hopped in his car, drove over there, shot the girl. But at least he had an alibi for the early portion of what he needed to prove. Then it turns out, another fortuitous event, he called, I guess, his ex-girlfriend or the mother of the child. And he said, I'm running late or I'll be home at whatever time. And because of that, with the cell phone pings, they were able to give him an airtight alibi. In other words, he was at Dodger Stadium, he was still around Dodger Stadium when the murder was committed, so there was no way that he could have committed the murder. They had a hearing, it wasn't a full trial. They had a hearing, and the judge, who later said, I believed that he was guilty, dismissed the case because of the airtight alibi. And the prosecutor even thought that he was guilty. Pretty much everyone thought he was guilty except for him and maybe his family. But because of Larry David, he was cleared. And the interesting thing about this was there were witnesses that put him at the scene of the crime. So you might say, well, they were wrong. Eyewitness testimony is very, very faulty. And I've done shows about this where people identifying someone of a different race or ethnicity, could get it wrong more likely than somebody, let's say a black man, sees another black man rob a bank. He would be more likely to pick out the correct guy than, let's say, a white man or an Asian man. And they've done studies about this, so what I'm saying is backed up by science. There's an expression, they all look alike. It might sound like a racist one, but it is true to a large extent. Just think about it. If you're a white person and you see an Asian man rob a bank, you will not differentiate the features the same way as another Asian man or woman, right? Or if I see a white man commit a crime, I'm in a better position to differentiate his features than, let's say, a black man or an Asian man. But witnesses get it wrong all the time, all the time. And then you find out later when there's DNA or they find a fingerprint that they were mistaken. And often it's not intentional. It's not like the person wants to pin it on somebody. They were mistaken. And once they get into the system as a witness, let's say, they're not getting up on that stand saying, I'm pretty darn sure that's the guy that did it. Because if they say that, you're creating reasonable doubt. So the prosecutor has to put somebody on, and I'm a former prosecutor, that's going to be sure. And you would hope the person wouldn't lie, and you would hope the person is correct. Because if the wrong guy, Juan Catalan was charged with murder. If Juan Catalan was convicted of this murder, and he didn't commit the murder, what's the result? An innocent guy goes to jail, his life is ruined, the lives of his family are forever changed, especially if he goes to jail for a long time. And the person that shot this girl is still out there. So you don't want to get it wrong, you want to be right. Now, nothing's 100%, often it's not. Now, obviously, if I witness a black man rob a bank and I know who that black man is, then I'm more likely to be right. I'm going to say, that's Joe Jones. I know who that is. That's different. But if it's just some random person. And I've also saw studies, I think it was Brain Games, where they staged a purse snatching. So they had a bunch of people under the ruse of something else. And they had a guy run up to a woman, snatch her purse, and take off. In broad daylight, in front of these people. And they all saw it. They all saw it. They all saw that crime, and I'm putting crime in quotes, because it was staged. The interesting thing was how many different stories, how many different versions you got from talking. There might have been like 10 or 15 witnesses. He had a red shirt on. He had a blue jacket on. He was 6 feet. He was 5'4". You'd be surprised. It's scary because people are convicted every day across this country based on eyewitness testimony. Now, I'm not saying eyewitness testimony should not be allowed, but it should be scrutinized for what it is. It's not an exact science. It's not like DNA. If you have DNA, it's 99.999 or 1 in a billion that it's that person. Or fingerprints. There's a certain science behind it, technology. It's less likely because it's not subject to human frailties, faulty memories. What if a murder was committed 5 years ago? Are you going to tell me that that person has the same memory? It's not like we're a video camera. Our memory can fade. It can be influenced. Studies have shown this. And that's the job of a defense attorney to say, are you sure? What was the lighting? Could there be a bias? Are you able to pick out this guy? Where were you standing? You know, was there a shooting? And if there's a shooting, the person would, and if he's close by, he's probably not looking at the guy that pulled the trigger. He's probably heading for the hills, or certainly turning around and running. So he might not get a good look at the guy that pulled the trigger. Because is he going to stand there and stare at the guy who just shot somebody else? Or is he going to turn around and run? If he turns around and runs, how does he get a good look at the guy? These are questions and the scrutiny that has to be used by a defense attorney and a prosecutor. Because a prosecutor is held to a higher standard. They have to make sure that they got the right guy as best they can. Like I said, it's not an exact science. Because if they get it wrong, an innocent person goes to jail and the guilty guy is still out there to commit more murders or rapes or robberies or whatever it happens to be. Very, very important. So that's why the DA is held to the higher standard, has to turn over discovery, Brady material, to show, which could exonerate the defendant or be used for cross-examination purposes. Has to turn over what he has. Like in My Cousin Vinny, he got Trotta's files. He's entitled to them. It's kind of the bedrock of our criminal justice system. You're allowed to know, just like you're allowed to face your accuser. We don't have whistleblowers in criminal law. But you also have a right to know what documentation they have against you, what witnesses they have against, what witnesses they might not have against you. It might be a witness that said, yeah, I saw a guy with red hair running from the scene. Well, the guy who is accused doesn't have red hair. So the defense attorney can make some hay out of it and say to the witness, you saw a guy with red hair running as soon as the shots were fired. Maybe it was a guy with red hair. Creates reasonable doubt. Doesn't mean the guy with red hair did it, but it can create reasonable doubt. Now, the case with Larry David was interesting because you just happened to have video proof which provided an alibi. You don't normally have that. And then you have cases where, like the OJ trial, they had enough evidence to convict him 100 times over. Guys are convicted every single day across the country with a fraction of what they had in the OJ trial. But that was a circus. And they made a mockery of it. And the defense attorneys did a very good job of spinning a web. And I think the jury also wanted to find fault with the prosecution's case. Then you had a detective that had used the N-word. And all of this going on. And could the DA be degraded? Well, degraded DNA wouldn't give you OJ. It would just be degraded. But he was found not guilty. And that's an example of, let's say, a celebrity trial. Most of the time you don't have that. Juan Catalan was not a celebrity. In all likelihood, he would have been convicted, gone to jail, and maybe got the death penalty. So the tale here is a couple of things. One is, if you believe that you're innocent, you know you're innocent, right? Get a good attorney. The attorney should work very hard for his client. Explore all avenues, not just assume his client is guilty, because the DA said he's guilty. And it's interesting because the DA and the judge thought this guy was guilty. I had a case some years ago where someone was accused of a sexual assault. And the DA was convinced the guy did it. And he was there, he had the opportunity, and he was charged with a crime. It turns out that a video that I was able to get showed that whatever happened was not a crime. Consensual was not a crime. Without that video, I don't know if I would have been able to get an acquittal, because the complaining witness, the female, was very, very, very convincing. Now, I never met her, but that's what I was told by the prosecution. Very, very convincing. And the prosecutor was upset when that prosecutor felt duped by that woman. And it's got to shake your confidence or your belief in human nature, because you don't want to believe that someone's going to lie to get someone else in trouble for a crime they did not commit. And there was no need. It wasn't even like something happened and she had to lie to protect herself. She was malicious. This poor individual, my client, could have gone to jail for many years for a crime he did not commit if it wasn't for that video that we found. I was made aware of it. I was able to use that to show the DA. In fact, the complaining witness hired an attorney to sue my client, and who didn't know about the video initially, and contacted me. And I said, I'm going to send you the video. You're not going to take this case, or you're not going to stay on this case. He said, what do you mean? Watch the video. After he saw the video, there was no civil lawsuit. So that's an example, again, of a video clearing someone. Sometimes it's a DNA, sometimes it's a fingerprint, but unfortunately, you don't always have this. And when you don't have it, the defendant could be in trouble, because he could say, I didn't do it. But he's not believed, because the complaining witness, in this case, it wasn't a mistaken identity. It was a lie, an outright lie. And I've had other cases where I had similar situations, where a polygraph cleared my client. Years and years ago, a college student. He could have gone to jail for a lot of years, charged with a very serious crime. But because I saw fit to use a polygraph, now it's not admissible at trial, it's not admissible in court. For a 440 motion or something like that, that's different, but it's not admissible. However, the detective here did the right thing. He used it as a tool. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but he used it as a tool, along with other tools. And he cleared my client. Because if we had to go to court, he might have felt pressure to take a plea or go to trial, spend a ton of money, and if that woman was believed, he would have been convicted, because it's beyond a reasonable doubt. If you believe the woman, then you're going to convict him. If you have reasonable doubt, you won't. But the woman, or in this case it was a young girl, not too young, but it was a teenager, she gave my guy's name instead of the person who did it. And again, I can't get into more than that. But that's a perfect example of, in this case, we had a detective who I think did the right thing. He could have said, I'm not doing a polygraph test. I got your guy. In the other case I talked about with the video, the prosecutor did the right thing. She did her job. She saw the video and reached the right conclusion. And as a prosecutor, that's what I used to do. It pained me. I wanted to make sure that I had the right guy, because it wasn't going to do anybody any favors if I had the wrong guy. And you see that all the time. The wrong person convicted. That's why the jury has to really, really take a good hard look at the evidence that's presented. And if it is beyond a reasonable doubt, acquit the guy. There's a lot of pressure on prosecutors, especially in the very, very serious cases. Murder, rape. Look at Richard Jewell. They were convinced this guy was the Centennial Park bomber, and he wasn't. They destroyed his life. Clint Eastwood did a movie about him. He didn't do it, but he fit, I guess, the FBI profile, kind of like a loner of a guy, a security guard, wanted to be a hero. They were convinced Richard Jewell was the bomber, and he wasn't. It took its toll on him, and from what I understand, until he died, it affected him because it was so public. It was the Olympics. You can't get a bigger venue than the Olympics, especially in the United States. And it was his home turf. He should have been a hero. It turned out that he was going to go down, going to be prosecuted. They believed that he did it, and they were wrong. Now, I'm not saying they intentionally thought he did it, meaning we want to get this guy. I don't think, for the most part, that prosecutors and cops want to get the wrong guy. They believe they got the right guy. And that's what happens when you go with blinders and say, this is the guy that did it, let me get the proof. Keep an open mind. And they know. I'm not going to have to tell a cop or a detective how to conduct their job. I'm just talking in general terms, where the good ones will say, I want to get the right guy. And that's, for the most part, that's what they want to do. But people make mistakes. And you have to be willing to say, I made a mistake. If you watch these TV shows, Forensic Files, it happens more often than you think. And you're watching the show and you're like, that guy's guilty as sin. And it turns out that he wasn't. But he fit the profile, or he looked like the right one. There was a case one time where this young girl witnessed a guy come into the house and rape and murder, I think it was her mother. And she pinned it on this guy that she believed to be the guy. And I think it might have been a stepfather or somebody that she was known to her. It wasn't a random person. And he was convicted. And he went to jail for quite a few years. His ex-wife didn't think he did it. And I think she was his wife at the time, but became the ex-wife. But she had a mission. And through DNA or whatever, she found out that the guy who likely did it was in the same jail as her ex-husband. And now here, you have a young kid saying, it's him. I know, it's Bob Jones. She wouldn't lie. She wasn't lying. She was mistaken. Because it was dark out, she was afraid, she saw somebody come in, and she had seen him come in prior to that. And then a person came in and similar looking, and she's probably hiding under the blanket or something, and that's who she thought she saw. And the wife used a ruse somehow to get, I think, a cigarette or something from this guy. Even in jail, I think they put it in a cup or something, got it out, and they were able to show that the guy who did it was not the person that was convicted, but was somebody else. Again, a perfect example of how science, technology, cops, prosecutors, detectives, willing to do the right thing and go above and beyond to make sure that the wrong person is not convicted. That's got to be horrible. And as a juror, you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want a guilty person to go free, but you want to make sure they get the right person. So that's the curious story of Larry David, Juan Catalan, a man that was almost convicted of murder, but because of an unusual set of circumstances. And what's interesting, I don't know if I mentioned this, in that episode, which I had never seen Curb Your Enthusiasm, but when I heard about this, I watched a little bit of the episode, and it's hilarious. In the episode, Larry David is late getting to a Dodger game. So what does he do? He picks up a prostitute so he can get on the HOV lane. And he brings her to the ball game. He takes her into the stadium. He sits with her. They're arguing. It's very funny. And then he sees a friend and he says to the friend who has a better seat, "Can I sit with you?" "No, you're not. You can't." It's a hilarious show. It's a hilarious episode. If you like Seinfeld, you kind of know a little bit of Larry David humor. And Curb Your Enthusiasm, he can curse. He can go a little bit beyond what you see on Seinfeld. But if you ever get the opportunity, watch it. The first frequently asked question I want to do has to do with criminal law. That's the theme, all right? And it's, do I need an attorney if I am charged with a crime? Now, you would think most people would understand that you should have an attorney. It's like, if I need surgery or if I have the flu, should I get a doctor or should I go to a doctor? Yes. If you're charged with a crime. Now, a crime is defined as either a felony or a misdemeanor. Felony punishable by a year or more, misdemeanor a year or less. And there are certain consequences that come along with a felony. Could lose the right to vote, hold certain jobs, hold certain licenses. Like if you're an attorney and you're convicted of a felony, you can't be an attorney. A violation of law is the third tier. Felony, misdemeanor, violation. It's not a crime. So sometimes you can go to court and work out a deal with the DA if it's a violation. It could be a traffic infraction. But if you're charged with a felony and misdemeanor, certainly in Suffolk County, and I can speak from experience, the DA, for the most part, does not want to deal with what they call a self-represented litigant. If you have a misdemeanor, they're going to say, get an attorney, come back with an attorney. If you can't afford one, you can get appointed legal aid. If there are two defendants, let's say, involved in the same kind of crime, the same set of events, and one has legal aid, the other one will get a court-appointed attorney. So you can get an attorney if you're indigent or make under a certain amount of money. But if you're charged with a felony or misdemeanor, it is very, very important to get an attorney. Because if you want to represent yourself, constitutionally, you have that right. The DA doesn't have to plea bargain with you, but you could say, I'm going to represent myself. Now, remember years ago, there was a shooting in New Hyde Park, Maryland at the train station, and Colin Ferguson killed a number of people. And in fact, one of the people he killed, the wife of that person that was shot and killed became a congresswoman, McCarthy, I think it is. And this man represented himself. It was one of the most bizarre things. I saw film clips of it. One of the most bizarre things I ever saw. At trial, he would be talking to witnesses and he says, did you see the person who shot that individual? Yeah, it was you. Get an attorney. You don't want to represent yourself. Now, even if you take a plea bargain, an attorney will be in a better position to advise you, because you won't get a plea bargain anyway, but you want to be in a position to work out the best deal possible. Even if you're guilty, there might be mitigating factors. You might have no priors compared to another guy that has 4 DWIs and now it's his 5th. He's going to be treated differently than you would be if it's your first DWI, all things being equal. In other words, not if you killed somebody and it's your first DWI, you're going to be treated more harshly than maybe somebody's had a second DWI and nobody got hurt. That's just the facts of the case. And it makes sense, right? Consequences. So it's very important to get that attorney. That attorney will sit down with you, will ask you what happened, will be in a position to know what he gets, what kind of discovery he gets from the DA, what kind of information he gets from the DA. Does he get a 911 tape? Is there a body cam that shows the crime? Is there a test that was done so he can look at it and say, that test was faulty, or that DNA sample was faulty for this reason, or the machine that wasn't calibrated properly. There's a whole bunch of different things that an attorney can do for you. In the Juan Catalan case we just talked about with Larry David, that attorney went to Dodger Stadium and did his homework. He could have just sat home and say, or in his office and say, you know what, this guy's guilty of sin. I'll put up some resistance, but I'll try to plea bargain. A plea bargain would have put this guy behind bars for a number of years. It wasn't fair for him to have to plea bargain because he didn't do it. But that's how the system is set up. You don't plea bargain, and sometimes a plea bargain isn't offered. You don't plea bargain, and you go to trial and lose, you're going to get a much worse sentence than if you took the plea. So they might say to you, we'll give you a year in jail. If you go to trial and lose, you might get 5. That's the way it is. Is it fair? Not necessarily. Because a person has the right to have their day in court. And if I was a judge, I would hope that I wouldn't hold it against that individual for exercising his right. Now, I heard a judge once say, I'm trying to get it correctly, they were saying, why isn't it not justice if he takes a plea or doesn't take a plea and then he gets convicted, he gets a longer sentence? And what the judge is basically saying was, you're getting leniency. But if you don't take that plea and you're convicted, then you get justice. And justice would be 5 years in jail, 10 years in jail, life, whatever the case might be. But the theme of this frequently asked question is, yes, you need an attorney, get a good one who can represent you, knows the system, been around the block a number of times. And, there are good young attorneys too, don't get me wrong. I was a prosecutor back in 89, 91. I've been doing criminal defense work since then. So I have a lot of experience. There are some attorneys that don't have the experience that I have, but they're still good attorneys. Just like when I was starting out, I didn't have the experience I have now. But it's very important. And the more serious the case, the more important it is. If you have a simple petty larceny case here in Suffolk County, where you stole a pack of gum, that's a misdemeanor. You get an attorney, you're going to work it out. You don't need the equivalent of F. Lee Bailey to get a good deal, because it's not a very serious charge. It's a misdemeanor, but it's pretty standard how it gets resolved. You attend the stop-lift program, assuming it's your first time and you have no other prior ACODs, and then you get an ACOD adjournment in contemplation of dismissal. And if you stay out of trouble in 6 months, the case is dismissed. If it's a marijuana charge, it could be a year. ACOD, adjournment in contemplation of dismissal. It means the case goes away as long as you don't get in trouble. Anything that'll bring you back. And sometimes people can't help themselves, and they do something again, and then it comes back, and the DA says, you got the break the first time, you're not getting the break now. Next frequently asked question. At what age, and I was asked this question tonight in a consultation with a potential client, what age can a child decide what parent he or she wants to live with? There's no magic age. You're not going to look up in a book or a statute that says 14, 15, 16. Now let's be clear. At 18, that child is deemed an adult. And you can't fight over the custody of an 18-year-old. Now don't get confused with child support. Child support goes to 21 or less if the child becomes emancipated, gets married, joins the military, the other one is death, of course, or gets a job where they can support themselves. So 18 is an adult. 17 is like 18. A 17-year-old, for the most part, is going to be allowed to live where they want to live, unless the mother is, high on crack every day, or the father's, a fall-down alcoholic. But for the most part, a 17-year-old is like an 18-year-old. A 16-year-old has an awful lot to say where they want to live. Not absolute, but pretty darn close. 15, 14, 13 have a lot to say, but not the final say. Younger kids don't have as much say at all. So you have a 5-year-old saying, I want to live with daddy. It's probably not going to carry the day. It depends on, I want to live with daddy because mom beats me. That's a different story. But it also comes down to, let's say an 11-year-old, which is kind of in that middle ground, has some say, not as much as an older kid. Can they articulate a reason why they want to live with a particular parent? So let's say you have an 11-year-old and says, I want to live with dad. Why? Oh, it's awesome. We play video games. He lets me stay up all hours of the night. I don't have to do my homework. Now, if a kid said that, you know what the judge is going to say? You're living with mom. Or I want to live with, mom because mom lets me stay up all night, whatever the case might be. So the judge wants to hear the articulable reason why, or the attorney for the child, and maybe ultimately the judge, why that child is saying what they're saying. If they say, I want to live with dad, he understands me, he takes me places, he does homework with me, I enjoy his company more than mom. Now, mom might not be a bad lady, but maybe this child will prosper under the father. I went to a seminar a number of months ago, and it's a common theme. And sometimes it's easy. You know, dad's a drug addict, alcoholic, mom's mother of the year, where does the kid go? Easy. What about this? What about, let's say, a father who's a hard charger, and he wants the kid to go to Harvard, and he wants him to be a lawyer, and he wants him to do all these great things. Now, the mother, on the other hand, right, is a very emotional, thoughtful person. She wears her emotions on her sleeve. And she's more of, maybe not a proper term, but more like a hippie. You know, I want my son to be happy. I don't care how much he makes in life. He can live on my couch for all I care. And I just want him to be emotionally happy. He may not be a success in life as people define as success, like a yuppie or something like that, but he'll be happy. Almost like, was a Crack magazine with the guy's always smiling, right? Like the hapless loser almost, but he's happy. He's not going to get the ulcer. He's not going to die of a heart attack because he's working, like me, many hours a week. But that's that mother. Now, if you're a judge, who do you think is the better influence? This is not, again, exact science. There's not a correct answer. Because being happy is important. Making money is not necessarily important. It might not be what that child wants as he gets older, becomes an adult. So it is not always cut and dry. Because the law is clear. What's in the best interests of the child? That's the easy part. What is in the child's best interest? Obviously, to be taken care of well, to be provided the necessities of life, a roof over that child's head, food, an education, of course, friends, to be around friends and family if at all possible. Those are easy things, we know. But beyond that, like the example I gave, hard charger, very successful monetarily, or happy, and maybe not rich. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you need some input from the kid. And rather than say, and I was a law guardian, we used to call it law guardians, now it's attorney for the child. I was one for 5 years. I wouldn't necessarily ask the, look, if you had a 16, 17-year-old, where do you want to live? But let's say you have 11, 12, 13, 14, you might not say it that way. It's a loaded question. Where do you want to live? It's almost like they got to give an answer. So I might say, tell me what it's like when you're with dad. Oh, we do this, we do that. He takes me to hockey, or we go get ice cream, or whatever. We go to the go-karts. What's it like with mom? Oh, we watch a movie, or we do this, or we do that. Whatever the case might be. And you try to look at the child and see where the child seems to be happier. Maybe when he talks about dad, he does it glowingly. He's smiling. But when he talks about mom, he's not. Oh, we do this, we do that. Or the reverse. That might give an indication. And maybe you meet with the child again. Because maybe before he walked into that room to talk to the attorney, he had a fight with his mother. Or his dad bought him the greatest gift on earth. And the kid is biased now, or he's brainwashed. So maybe you say, bring the kid back another time. Dad brought the kid, mom brings the kid. And you look at it that way. Maybe you need a third time. And the kid, but if the kid's consistently like, oh yeah, dad's this. Yeah, mom's okay, we go here, we do that. Right? Now that doesn't mean the kid should go with dad, because what if dad wouldn't send the kid to school, or say, yeah, you're not feeling well, you don't have to go to school. There are certain things a parent has to do. I'll give you another thing to think about. I often hear a client say, well, little Johnny doesn't want to go with his dad. Or doesn't want to go with his mom. How old is little Johnny? Little Johnny's 10. Little Johnny doesn't have that right to say, he has a right to say it, But he has to be encouraged to go with dad. Now, if he says, I don't want to go with dad because dad beats me, that's one thing. If he says, I don't want to go with dad, well, maybe mom's saying dad's a bad guy. Dad's not paying child support. Dad's not willing to pay for your camp. Oh, I don't want to go with dad. I see it all the time. I've been doing this 30 years. So a judge has to roll up his sleeves and say, okay, why does little Johnny not want to go with dad? Now, one of the questions I would ask as an attorney for the child is say, let's say to the mom, are you encouraging him? Yeah, I'm encouraging him. Okay. Then you talk to little Johnny. When you say, I don't want to go with dad, what does mom say to you? You don't have to go. It's up to you. That's not encouraging. That's letting the kid do whatever he wants to do. When I use the example to the mom, let's say it's the mom. Johnny doesn't want to go. Okay. What if Johnny needed his vaccination and he says, I don't want to get it? Would you say, you don't have to, Johnny? What if the child didn't want to go to school? I don't like my teacher. I don't want to go to school. Okay, Johnny, you don't have to go to school. No, because the mother would be brought up on charges. At the very least, CPS would get involved and a neglect petition would be filed against her if the child missed a lot of school. Happens all the time. I've seen it. Educational neglect. You got to send your kid to school. If the kid's legitimately sick, and some parents are a little more careless and the kid misses 5 and a quarter. That's probably not going to be a red flag. But if the kid's not going to school for a period of time, that mother can get in trouble. So I say, what do you do? Well, he's got to go to school. Well, he's got to see his dad. And dad has to encourage to see mom. It's a two-way street. Very, very important issues that come up every single day in a divorce case and a family court case. And the good judges and the good lawyers and the good attorneys for the children get it. And they know what to look for. They give a damn. There are attorneys out there that don't give a damn. There are judges out there that don't give a damn. I'm not going to name them. We attorneys know who they are. Some care more than others. It's a fact. You can see it. And some of the attorneys and attorneys for the children, and thank God it's a minority, but they're derelict in their duties when they don't do the right thing. And it happens in every field. An accountant that doesn't do your books properly. The cop that gets lazy and doesn't follow protocol. Right? All walks of life. And some jobs, just a fact, are more important than others. A brain surgeon's job is more important than maybe the old milkman's job. It's a fact. Doesn't mean he's better than that guy. It needs more care. He has to be more careful. He's not going to take a couple of drinks and do brain surgery. Whereas some of the other jobs might not matter if the guy takes a drink or two when he's doing his job. Let's be honest. Okay? Deciding on the fate of a child is the most important thing any human being on this earth can do. Bar none. More important than the brain surgeon. Because worst case scenario, that person dies on the table. But look at the torture a child can be subjected to. An 8-year-old child died recently. Now again, I don't know all the facts. I don't know if the judge made a mistake. There's allegations. I don't know. But that child ended up with that monster that was the cause of that 8-year-old child's death. There has to be an inquiry. You have to be held accountable if you did the wrong thing. And how do you know if the wrong thing was done? I would hope good attorneys are going to do their job to see what was done. And I'm not casting aspersions on anybody. But when something like that, when CPS drops the ball, they have to look into it. The same thing when a patient dies and they shouldn't have. They look at the doctor. What happened? Right? Or a cop, when someone dies in the custody of a police station, they look at that. They have to. They wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't. You have to look at that. And again, I'll reiterate it. Deciding where a child goes, who takes care of a child, the care a child gets, whether it be foster care if the child's taken away from the parents, the most important thing in the universe. Can't stress it enough. Think about it. An 8-year-old child, they can't protect themselves. They can't. Even if they say, Dad did this, Mom did this. Okay, you got to go with Dad or Mom. And it's not easy, right? So I'm not saying a judge made a mistake, but you want the judge to care. You want them to hear the facts. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Is the mother lying? I've had cases where I maybe thought initially the mother was telling the truth, and then I see she's not. Just my observation as a trained attorney, as a former prosecutor, as a domestic violence unit. I experienced all these things, and I have a pretty good read on people. Can I be wrong? Of course. But if I care, I have a better chance of doing my job than if I don't care. Let the attorneys present their case. I see too often, Your Honor, oh, no, I got it. No. Let me have my say. You can rule against me. Let me have my say. Let me do my job. If I'm coming from out of left field, that's a different story. But hear what I have to say, because sometimes things out of left field are relevant, or it's something that needs to be looked into. Now, I'm a little animated now because I've been doing this 30 years, and I've seen children not taken care of properly. And I've seen attorneys, I've seen judges, I've seen attorneys for the child, former law guardians, drop the ball. Now, there are great ones out there. There are really good attorneys and really good judges and really good attorneys for the children. And years ago, really good law guardians. And I hope I was one of them. I believe I was, because I cared. I got off the panel because I couldn't give it the attention I needed. I was with another firm. I was getting pulled in different directions. And I used to like to go to the house if I was representing a child. I want to see the house. I want to see the kid's bedroom. Maybe I open his refrigerator. I want to see what this kid is living like. If I go to the house and there's nothing in the refrigerator, probably not being fed properly. If he's wearing the same thing over and over again, or if there's no heat, or there are exposed wires, or there are vicious dogs there that maybe are not properly cared for, that troubles me. Maybe I don't think that a child should be in that particular environment. Right? But I'm not the judge. But I make a recommendation. I can put my head on the pillow at night if I know that I'm fighting for my client, doing the right thing. I don't always win. I do the best I can for a client. Sometimes the judges rule against my client, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not. And it's frustrating. I remember the Menendez murder trial, remember? And I forget, Leslie Abrams. She had the blonde wig and TV personality. And someone asked her, he's like, what is it like representing a guilty person? And her answer was fantastic, spot on. I wasn't a big fan of hers at the time, but what she said made an impact on me. And it was something that I repeat. Representing a guilty person is easy. Now I'm overgeneralizing it, but it's easy. You do the best you can for that guilty individual. You try to mitigate the sentence. You try to avoid jail if you can, or if he's going to get 10 years, you try to get 5. You bring to light maybe weaknesses in the prosecution's case. Or, my guy never got in trouble before. Or, I have a witness that might have said he didn't do it. You bring that to light to the prosecutor. I did that today in a case. You know, there were witnesses that saw this. This is what I have. Here you go. I present it to the DA. But Leslie Abrams, to finish my thought, said it's easy to represent a guilty person. It is scary as heck, my words, when you have an innocent person. Think about that for a second. The guilty person, you do the best you can, you go to sleep at night. When you have an innocent person, especially if they're in jail, or they're looking at some serious consequences, or you represent the parent that shouldn't lose their child, but does, because a judge got it wrong. That is scary. That bothers me. Just like a doctor or surgeon that loses a patient on the table. It's sad. You don't like it. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But it's part of life. The system is not perfect. And in many respects, the system could use an overhaul. Well, look at the new laws that were passed with the bail laws, right? The genius Democrats in Albany, I'll say it, they're fools. To take the discretion away from judges and say, these are the list of crimes. He'd be a bad guy, but if he committed that crime, he walks. In Nassau, they arrested a guy. He was allowed out. The judge, in fact, at first, kind of violated the law and said, I'm going to impose bail. I don't care. There should be bail. A higher judge said, you can't do that. He was let go with, I think, a monitor, an ankle monitor. He broke the ankle monitor, he's on the lam. I was in court the other day, not my case, but an illegal alien was arrested for drug sale. Serious crime. It's not using a little marijuana, selling drugs. Felony weight. And what he did, and he was an illegal alien, and there was no ICE detainers. So the judge had no choice, I guess, and said, okay, there's no hold, I have to let him go, no bail. Meaning, he didn't have to post bail. Guy's gone. You think that guy's coming back? Hell no. He's going to set up shop somewhere else. And that's wrong. Criminal defendants have rights, absolutely. But they shouldn't have more rights than the victim. The victim also has rights. So we have a constitution. We have amendments, the Fifth Amendment, right against self-incrimination. We have other laws in place where the prosecutor has to turn over documentation. That's all well and good. But we have to also protect innocent victims. And when dangerous people get let out, not everybody should have to post bail. I'm not saying that. But when a dangerous person is set free without having to post bail, who suffers if he commits another crime? It's the next victim and the next victim and so on. And the first victim who might be intimidated by that guy. So these are really important issues. We're not going to get to the other ones. We only have about 55 seconds left. Just to talk about my book for a second. I wrote a book called Divorce: A Practical Guide. Great read. It's chock full of information. And information is key because no matter what kind of case you have, do your homework. You could Google things, you go to the library, you could get a book online, you could do what you need to do. Be an informed consumer. You're going to buy, I bought windows. I just put windows on my house. I did my homework. I wasn't going to just blindly get somebody and sell me a bill of goods. I don't know. I'm not a window expert, but get the information. I really want to thank you for watching this show. I hope you were entertained, and I hope you learned something. And sometimes I repeat myself in some of my shows because it's important. You learn. That's how little kids learn. That's how adults learn. That's how I learn. Repetition. You hear the same thing over and over again. I want to thank you. You have a great day. Catch me next Saturday at 10 a.m., channel 115. Take care.